Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Health Force Podcast. Very serious topic today. I think we're going to get a lot covered and produce a lot of good, so I'm hoping people are able to stick it out through the entire video to really gain some insights and what I think is some common sense business acumen. Okay, acumen is just a word for like business sense, professionalism, having the know-how to be able to navigate these sort of negotiations. And today's episode, as you can tell from the title, is going to be mainly dealing with contracts when we're talking about esports athletes and the organizations that they sign to. Esports is Wild Wild West. There is no doubt about it. I've only been in business for 5 years total now. I'm only 28 years of age, so I got in when I was 23, doing our fitness business, and learned how to get clients and do budgets, taxes. I had to do all of it on my own and learned, again, essentially how to become a businessman. And I learned trial by fire. And, coming into the esports space primarily from a fitness and business background and not really gaming and esports, it's allowed me to have a different perspective, I think, than what you have currently, because the players that are in these pro leagues or that are signing professional contracts, they've been in the scene. They've played multiple games. They've been in the pro leagues before. They've signed at orgs before. It's not like a bunch of new people every single time, and then everybody's just getting confused because it's their first rodeo. There's a lot happening here, but nonetheless, the background of the players tends to be gaming, not business, not sales, not marketing, not law. It's gaming, and it's obvious. And then on the opposite side of it, you have these organizations who are run by former gamers. So they kind of share the same deficiencies as the players do when it comes to business sense. And so then there's this arrangement where two sides are negotiating a deal. It appears that there is a very low level amount of lawyers involved most times. It's usually just the players and the orgs negotiating themselves. But again, you're having both sides not really having the business sense to drive through this in an efficient manner, and we're left with a big pile of mess, conflict, tension, drama, gossip. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous and something that is completely against someone's mental fitness. It is the polar opposite of what you should be aiming for when it comes to your mindset and mental well-being. And so today's episode is an attempt to get past this. Whether I don't even care if two players hear this podcast and it changes their mindset about this, or some manager at an org sees it, I don't care how the volume of this episode, but what I'm looking at is the meat and potatoes of it, the content which we're about to discuss, and hopefully create further discussions off of it. So I wanted to start because most of this recently has gone down from the Call of Duty Pro League, between Midnight Esports Gaming, Accelerate Gaming, the players, Roster Mania. There's all this going on, and right off the top, we got to mention that we're not involved with any of the teams or any of the players. So we are not actively training anybody in the Call of Duty Pro League. We are not working with any of the orgs that have roster spots that are involved in today's podcast. And obviously, I'm not privy to inside info or behind-the-scenes stuff. This is going to be mere observations from what we have available. So obviously, there's going to be details that are missing. And that's not really the point, because I think we have enough information to go off of to actually make concrete decisions and opinions. So I wanted to read actually from the Call of Duty Pro League Handbook, 2019 version. I don't know if many people have done this, but if you go down to section 3 and read section 4 and read team license. It reads as the following, quote, "A team license is a permit which allows an organization or entity," and they list the types, including LLCs, etc., and corporations. "It allows them to have a team in the Pro League. The team license is granted to a team at the time the team accepts the invitation. For the Pro League, a team license is non-transferable and a revocable license to compete in the Pro League in accordance with these Pro League rules in the handbook." So I actually don't know if that means that teams can or cannot sell their license. I don't know if anybody's even read this before, but to say it's non-transferable, I don't know. But this is the important part. A team owner is defined as any person who directly or indirectly owns or has any financial ownership, management, control, or interest in a team. A team owner is only entitled to one team in the Pro League. If a team owner has such rights with more than one team, blah, 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 blah. Essentially, he has to sell one off. You only have one. A team license cannot be held by a player in the Pro League. If a qualified team does not belong to an organization or entity prior to their qualification, such team must either form an organization or entity, which shall be managed solely by an individual who is not participating in the Pro League as a player, or they have to join an existing organization or entity to remain in the Pro League. The administration may, but is not obligated to provide assistance in connection with the foregoing. Let me say again. The administration may, but is not obligated to provide assistance in connection with the foregoing. So again, I wonder how many players that are in the Call of Duty scene actually know this. And I'm sure it's probably, I'd imagine all of them or most of them. But I don't think the layperson watching knows this, that a team that qualifies cannot have their own license unless they essentially create a business entity and have it managed and run by somebody that's not one of the players. So we're creating this because of the rule set, and I'm not really going to commentate on if the rules are good or bad. It's not really the angle I'm going for. But the rules are the rules, so that's what we have. So if a team's going there as a bunch of free agents, right, or a bunch of amateur gamers, and it's 5 buddies and a coach or something, or just maybe just the 5 buddies, the 5 gamers, they go out and they compete in these qualifying rounds to get into the Pro League, and they make it. If they do not sign to an organization and or create their own, which isn't that hard of a process, but am I going to trust, after my opening monologue about the lack of business acumen, am I going to trust these individual gamers to make an actual business entity and go through that process? No, not really. So they are left with the option of risking having, like, they wouldn't be allowed, even if they do qualify, or they have to go sign to an org. So they should know this ahead of time. So this is what I'm getting at, this preparation aspect of this. When you go into negotiation with a contract, or even just a situation in general, you have to understand all the parameters. And clearly in this case, you're not going to go to Pro League unless you have a contract with an organization. Or, like they say, make your own up. Which, again, I wouldn't trust people to do, because I don't know if that's, if I don't know if that would even align with their goals. But this main part, you're going to have to sign with an org, right? How come people are looking at this thing so short term? This is probably the biggest thing of today's podcast, is the short term versus the long term, and how people's mindsets are always geared towards this instant gratification, short term thinking. And it drives their behaviors. And that is a massive mistake. So if you're somebody right now who is obsessed with short term contracts, with money up front, with all this stuff now, and you can't step back and look at the big picture and look at what it means to be a prominent figure in a pro league in any game, forget about Call of Duty, any game. If you're only looking at this thing like you're so hungry for your next contract that you sell out things that are a detriment to your long term, it's problematic. So the reason I want to start with that is because we've got to be very clear about who owns these spots in a pro league. The organization or the players. And clearly, at least in this instance, in Call of Duty, the players themselves cannot own the league spot. They cannot. It is against the handbook rules. Okay, it's written right in there. So the players know ahead of time that they're going to have to sign with an organization. And I'm looking and I'm seeing kind of really 2 strategies that people are using when they're either an amateur roster or just an unsigned roster, but they are still a talented group that think they can actually qualify to Pro League. So there's really 2 strategies that players are using. Number 1, sign some form of preliminary contract with an org before qualifying and before getting in. And essentially, the contract states, you'll play for our org. If you qualify, the roster spot obviously goes to the org, and we'll renegotiate on salary and length of contract. If you don't qualify, you'll just be released or cut. And so they're signing essentially what amounts to like a month contract or 2-month, 3-month contract, something real short term, to try to get ahead of this thing. But the error with this approach is that they leave themselves in no man's land for when they actually qualify. And again, I can't speak to specifics but it tends to be the perception I get about like Midnight Esports, where they preliminary had a contract before qualifiers, the team qualifies, and then they can't come to terms after that. But the Pro League goes on. I mean, it's not going to wait for everybody to sign a contract officially. So now they're in no man's land where they have almost absolutely zero leverage to negotiate anything. Okay? Absolutely nothing. The league spot goes to the organization. The players can't own it anyways. So they actually qualify. The organization now has the roster spot. And they're trying to negotiate now. Now they're trying to negotiate salary, compensation, and the player's own entitlement and spoiled nature. And yeah, I'm going to use those words. It is players, and I don't want to stereotype, and I don't want to speak as for a group, but a large percentage of esports players and athletes to this point, in my opinion only, one man's opinion, so honestly, what does it matter? But in my opinion, they are very entitled and spoiled from a me standpoint. They don't understand the big picture. And again, that's where the lack of business acumen comes in, is they're like, it's no wonder there's tension and chaos around contracts and team conflicts between the rosters and the actual org that they sign to. Because you have a set of players that don't understand business. They don't understand leverage. They have no idea about negotiations. They're in a tough spot, and yet they're still asking for things that, in my opinion, again, would be absurd from a business standpoint. They're asking for too much salary, too much job security, too much blanket of protection. And I'll actually use that word later, because there was a professional that used that word, blanket of security. And that's fine. That's a good thing to pursue. But business is business. You don't just get that. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be smart. So that's kind of setting the stage for today. But that was, again, that's one strategy that I'm looking at a lot of rosters using. Though they're trying to sign a preliminary contract before qualifying, and if they qualify, they can renegotiate something different. But again, the downside is that's a big if. That's a big what if. Like, what if we don't agree on salary? Like, well, again, you should probably have these conversations before that. Or strategy number 2 is they go through qualifiers, they stay focused on the mission, and then once they qualify, they try to field offers before Pro League starts. Probably less distraction with that one. Obviously, they'd have to self-fund themselves through qualifiers if that's a problem, staying up in a hotel or food or whatnot. Whereas in the first strategy, it's my understanding usually an org will put up the cost for that. They'll house the team. They'll pay them either a small salary or something while they're qualifying, so they can just stay focused on the mission. On option 2, you obviously don't have that, so you're self-funded. You're doing everything out, on your own. It allows you to maintain focus, I think, on the gaming aspect of it. Don't have to worry anything about business. But obviously, if you don't qualify, no big deal. I mean, you were never signed to begin with. You just go home. If you make it to Pro League, we are still stuck in a similar scenario because we were still in no man's land, because according to the handbook, the team cannot keep their own roster spot unless they go through this process of creating an LLC and assigning another manager and an owner. And are people realistically going to do that every time you have a one-off team qualify? Probably not. Costs a couple $100. I mean, that's not even the hardest part. I just don't think the management of that and the business acumen, again, that it would take to do that is going to be feasible. So, again, but it's the same scenario in most cases where you qualify, you're an amateur roster or just an unsigned team, you make it, but according to the handbook, you guys cannot just play as a bunch of players. You have to have an organization or some sort of owner administrator. So what do? Well, you start fielding offers from organizations that don't have a team in Pro League yet. And so, but again, the same sort of case happens. There's no leverage for the players. They either have to sign a deal and a contract, or they're just going to forfeit their roster spot. So again, now they're trying to negotiate, and again, using those poor qualities of entitlement and being spoiled and demanding, and it's allowing them to become frustrated because they're not getting what they want. When from the get-go, this should be obvious. It should be obvious that they're not going to get what they want. They don't have the leverage. So they end up taking a deal that they don't really like. And then that just festers. And then all season and all pro, through the length of the Pro League, these sort of things fester behind the scenes. And I'm not going to just shim the players. I'm going to be very clear. Our company's worked for some organizations. We've worked with players individually. We've worked with coaches. And, I mean, there's a ton of blame to go for organizations. Like, a ton. This is a two-way street problem. Players on one hand, organizations on the other. I've smacked organizations, and my biggest criticism of them has continued to be that they don't provide value. A lot of them look to just increase brand or social media presence. It's actually quite odd. I don't know what most people are going for when they're building an esports organization, because their behaviors don't really match their ambitions, or their behaviors don't match what they're saying. It's almost like organizations are coming to contract. When they arrive on a contract, they usually just license what it essentially amounts to is licensing their name and logo to a roster to play, and that's the relationship. The organization pays the players a salary. The players play the video game. When the players win money in the prize pools, they pay back a certain percentage as stipulated in their contract to the organization. And that's it. And there's a massive lack of value from the org to the players. That is not going to be sustainable. I'm telling you right now, if that becomes a theme, the resentment between players and orgs is just going to continue to grow. What orgs have to do is learn to be valuable. You got to provide training, development, career growth. You've got to find ways to make a relationship last more than a phase of a season, or 2-3 months, or 6 months. You've got to find a way so that players want to sign to your org, and it's not just for the salary. The salary whole part is stupid, by the way. There's a big difference between needing money to live off of, because that's obviously what everybody says is, well, we need money to live off of, versus what a salary bubble looks like. Okay, for those who may not be familiar with business and real estate, like a housing bubble, similar concept where there's an inflated sense of worth to something, and in this case, it would be business would not be sustainable. And again, when I look from a business standpoint at organizations, almost again, this is just my observations, this is my opinion, and just from what I'm able to read online, I don't have inside knowledge. The entire Accelerate scenario with the Call of Duty team almost looks directly involved with this as a problem, which is the overhead cost of running a team when the contracts have inflated salaries. That's problematic for the org. They can't sustain the costs. The expenses are too high with it. It's not profitable. It's absolutely completely opposite of profitable. They're hemorrhaging money. They're hemorrhaging a loss. And then, we're all surprised. We're all supposed to be surprised when there's problems and shady behavior going on behind the scenes. Again, to me, it's just outside perspective. I think it's pretty obvious that that's the path we go down, because the two sides cannot figure this relationship out. And actually, what's happening is, scenarios like this Call of Duty League are making everything worse, because then both sides get entrenched further. The players start to resent the orgs even worse, and then they go on their platforms, Twitter, YouTube, etc., and just bash all the orgs about how terrible it is, and oh, poor me. Meanwhile, you guys are playing video games for a living. It's amazing. It's an opportunity, and we're sitting here spoiled on the bad side of things. Meanwhile, the league's going on, and it's absolutely they're still in the heat of competition. And I could never imagine that. I could never imagine competing in something and dealing with so much drama on the back end of it that it's going to detract from the goal. But it's happening. And then the orgs, because players bounce from contracts all the time, demand trades, they don't hold up their end of contracts, they always want higher and higher salary. The orgs then get entrenched further in their negotiation tactics, and they play hardball even harder back, and they put more things in their contracts that entangle and ensnare the players and are locking them down to further things as a defense to them acting spoiled in the first place. The players don't read those things. They sign the contract, and then they're mad that they're ensnared and swallowed up by contractual obligations. It's an absolute nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. Something else I need to address. I've seen this word blackmail be used 1,000 times, but I don't think people understand what the hell blackmail is. So I've gone to good old Wikipedia to read it to you. Blackmail is an act of coercion using the threat of revealing or publicizing either substantially true or false and often damaging information about a person to the public in order to get certain demands met. If an org presents a contract to a player and the players reject the contract and the org says, well, we're not going to budge, this is our offer, you either take it or leave it. If you don't sign it, we're just going to find a new roster. And the players get mad because they feel like they're being forced to sign that or else their dreams are crushed. Let me be clear, that is not blackmail. That is not forcing, that's not coercion. That is not even I mean, that's not even really strongman tactics. That's not even strong arm tactic. That's not even really harsh negotiation. That's the understanding business leverage and the way the rules are currently written. You're not going to keep your roster spot if you are unsigned. Therefore, you have to sign to an org. Here's our offer. We're an org. You've got 3 days left before. Like, there's a big difference between blackmailing and actual criminal behaviors, or I would even, it doesn't need to be criminal. I mean, I would even go and say malicious intent versus just good business sense and negotiation. Those are two different worlds. I understand you don't like both, but you don't get to say people are blackmailing you because they're making you sign a contract you don't like. Then don't sign it and you're a free agent. There you go. Oh, you don't want to be free agent? Okay, then sign the contract. But this again, that's the entitlement part. I should get what I want, and I don't want either of these scenarios, so somebody should give it to me. That behavior is rooted out, firmly rooted out. So if I look at, I got a couple things pulled up. I want to get into it. There are articles from some websites because I think it's going to help us give us some info. And again, I got to state for like the 5th time, just so I'm very crystal clear, because what's going to happen is I'll get 1 or 2, 3 nitpickers come on here and, well, you didn't know this information. I have no inside information on any of this. I am like every other person in the world. I am watching it unfold live on Twitter. I'm watching it be published in different articles and interviews, and players film themselves speaking and talking, and I'm just watching. And I'm able to have my own opinion. I'm watching it. I don't need to necessarily know all the details to make any opinion. I hope that makes sense. So yes, there are certainly things that I may misstate, misquote, have incorrect. I'm just going off of what is publicly available on the internet, and we have enough to get a point across today. Before I get into these things that I have pulled up in terms of quotes and interviews and just more information, I got to say this. It's a really good practical tip. It's a good takeaway practical tip right now, right here. Primarily for players, but also for the orgs, because they're two sides of this relationship. The orgs need to provide more value. They need to start doing more things. I'm talking personal trainers, dietitians, registered, whatever, nutritionists, mental fitness coaching, sports psychologist, a development coach, an HR. I do not care. I don't care how exactly they want to build out value, but they need to start building out value. Okay? They've got to start doing it. You've got to give players a reason to sign with you outside of handbook regulations. If that's the only thing that's keeping players signing in Call of Duty, for instance, if that's the only thing that's keeping them there, it's problematic. I would expect someone like Optic Gaming is providing value to their players. They've had I think a fairly consistent roster. They're competitive. You know, the players that are playing on that roster have some of the biggest brands in Call of Duty, some of the best social acumen for sure, social proof. So they must be doing something right. And again, I don't know anything about optics. So, but I take that versus the rest of the field, and that's where I'm getting at. And again, my time spent in esports has been very much that experience of orgs doing next to nothing to help the players, and actually the players, feel more frustrated by the org. Like they feel as if they didn't have to sign to an org, they would do things more efficiently and do it better. That is a massive problem if players feel that way. And again, that's definitely been a feeling that we've experienced through our work, mental fitness coaching and talking to players and engaging with them and trying to solve problems, is they're not real keen on orgs, especially ones that are disorganized and do not provide value. So you sending somebody a jersey and saying, oh, look how cool it is, we'll make a Twitter video for you and like help you out, that ain't good enough. Oh, okay, well, that's not good enough, friend. Then we'll just pay them an absurd salary. They want $3,000 a month, we'll give them $3,000 a month. Again, until people learn how to have a healthy relationship with money, it's a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid. You paying somebody money, but still providing no value, and then those players pay you the money back when they win, that's just, all you're doing is exchanging money at different points in time. And that's only granted if the teams win. And it's really hard to win. So what happens is the teams don't win all that often, but they have the pressure of this huge salary overhead that they're creating for these orgs, because the players just keep asking for higher and higher and higher money, and no orgs are standing up to them telling them, no, you're out of your mind, I'm not paying you $10,000 a month, or $7,000 a month, or $5,000 a month. You don't bring that much value back to the org. Maybe they do. Maybe they do bring it back. But they better bring back a lot of value to have $50,000 a month overhead. or $10,000, $12,000, whatever it is, to have tens of thousands of dollars in overhead just in salary. It's problematic. And so that's why I say things like there's creating a salary bubble, because I just don't know how you pay for that. Like if you're an organization and you're in multiple, unless you focus it in on one game, that's probably doable. If you go in and you say Call of Duty's the game, PUBG's the game, Fortnite's the game, Apex Legends is the game, whatever game, if you go in and you try to build one roster and provide all resources to that one roster, and that roster carries large overhead in exchange for winning prize pools, gaining social awareness, being able to sell things to the audience that you're creating now through that roster, unless that's happening, I just don't know how you're going to carry overhead of like $5, $6, $8, $10, $12, $15,000 a month overhead for multiple titles. If you're spending $8,000 on PUBG, you're spending, $12 on Call of Duty. Like that's going to be a problem, because then when you add all that up on your budgeting sheet and you see what your expenses are, I don't know how you make that back. And so you're seeing a lot of orgs struggle with the finances because they're all going after sponsorships, and it's hard to get sponsorships. That ain't an easy thing. I think people are underestimating that. Congrats, by the way, to Cloud9. I saw they partnered up with BMW, which is huge. That's big news. That's a big deal. You might see other brands follow the size of BMW. But again, they're going to go to the best of the best. They're going to go to Cloud9, Optic, Team Liquid. Like your mid to low to near new orgs, you're going to have a problem if you're going to rely on the sponsorship model when there's other orgs out there that have way more attention than you. So that's just food for thought. So before I went off on the riff there, to settle this dispute, the orgs have to provide value, but I think there needs to be more of a long-term relationship conversation. And I don't know if players like that right now, and frankly, I don't give a crap, because they're wrong with how they currently behave, and that is going to need to change. So again, if I can get 1, 2, or 6 gamers to listen to this, change their mindset, they reap the benefit, they go in differently to their next contract negotiation, and they're in a way better scenario, I'm ecstatic. I'm exactly thrilled. They need to look at a longer relationship. So if you're going into a qualifying event, okay, and somehow you're able to strike a deal with an organization before the qualifier, so maybe you have some big brand name or something like that, or you've got some social awareness, maybe you were on a previous season or something, I don't know. But if you're able to secure a relationship with an organization before you actually even qualify, I think it's an absolute mistake, and I would advise against it. And again, I'm not a lawyer either, so that's the other thing I got to say too. Like, it's one man's opinion, okay? Take it or leave it. It's definitely not legal advice. But go in with the intention, go in with the mindset that instead of signing some short-term contract that's going to create a no man's land problem for us once we actually qualify, why would you not create a 2-phase contract from the get-go? Phase 1 is qualifying, and then it splits. If we qualify, this happens. Probably cut and released. Or you might get in with a nice org that wants to foster and create a training development system, which would be a really smart idea from an org. Wink, wink, talk about value. And then you can even sign, and then maybe they have to go into a training system and develop a system, and then you try again with that same roster if you believe in it. Or part 2, we do qualify. This contract kicks into this gear, and then you should almost already have everything negotiated out: salary, length of service, stipends, benefits, perks, personal trainers, mental fitness coaches, analysts. That should all be negotiated previous ahead of time. And the phase only kicks into that if you make Pro League. Then you're done. And then you can negotiate before these events with a little more time. But again, you're probably better off just getting an agent in the first place, getting a lawyer in the first place, and then doing this whole thing. That's a lot of work. I don't think a lot of players are going to be turned on by that idea. But again, that's still the mindset. Now, how you actually implement that, I think there's some leeway there, some creativity that can be generated. But that's something I think should happen, is a long-term relationship with an organization, not just using them as your piggy bank to make it in a Pro League. Then once you make it in a Pro League, you think you're going to get traded to a big org. That is a nightmare scenario. And I'm pretty sure that's what happened with Midnight Esports. Midnight Esports, the roster signed to Midnight. Midnight, I guess, is a new org or low-tier org. They're just brand new, so they probably don't have a lot of operating cap. I don't know, but they're new. They signed this contract to qualify. Midnight, I think, puts up their expenses, pays them maybe a little bit. That roster gets into the Pro League. The Pro League roster spot now goes to Midnight Esports. And then you have, it's my understanding that bigger orgs would have reached out to these players on Midnight and been like, hey, we want to sign you, or hey, we want to buy your spot. And then Midnight pretty much was like, no, like they're not for sale. We're not selling the roster spot. And then the players get pissed because they want to go play for some big org and make a lot more money. But they signed this contract with Midnight. So Midnight has a spot, not the next team. And there's nothing that compels Midnight to go do that. And actually what should have happened is this player should have had those talks with Midnight Esports or whoever before the qualifiers so you can understand their intention. And if their intention was never to sell, then maybe you shouldn't have signed with them. But hey, one man's opinion. Everybody else is quick to blame everybody else and wants to say shady and blackmail and all this dumb shit that's absolutely not true from a legal standpoint, just from basic definitions off of common language knowledge. Quit blaming everybody and start blaming yourself. It's usually a really good strategy. So, I wanted to get into this one really quick. We have, there is the CEO of Accelerate Gaming, who has, again, been accused of blackmailing by his players and refusing to pay their salary. This is absolutely, again, if I take it at face value as to what CEO Justin Tan says in the interview he did with VP Esports, if I take at face value what he says in this interview, and I believe him, if I do, this is exactly what we talked about from the preface, which is this is a financial burden having esport rosters because you sign them to ridiculous contracts. So my advice to the organization is quit signing them to ridiculous contracts. Quit signing them to ridiculous contracts. Don't pay them $4,000 a month each, $2,000 a month each if you can't afford it. I think it's pretty basic. But the idea is Accelerate Gaming went into this and all along they were going to sell the roster spot, which is another it reminds me of like the stock market. When you buy a stock, you hold it, and then you quickly try to sell it off at a profit. It's kind of what this reminds me of here. So again, you have this roster of Call of Duty of players. They sign a deal with Accelerate Gaming. The roster makes it into the Pro League, and Accelerate's paying them on a contract. And again, I don't know how that came down. I don't know if they had to renegotiate the no man's land, or if they just continued their contract from before the qualifiers. But the intention was to sell that license and that team to somebody else because Accelerate, I guess, could not carry the overhead. So their goal was just to quickly sell it, or even like real estate, buy and flip kind of a thing, right? It's an absolute nightmare reading through this interview just because, again, of the lack of business acumen. And I'm of two minds on this. The CEO, Justin Tan, I think is like a young college student with probably minimal business experience, so he's put in a really tough spot. So I'm empathetic to that because it's not, as he's now experienced, business is hard. It's complicated, but at the same time, I'm almost thinking like, well, what'd you expect? You know what I mean? Like you went into this thing and you got shit on. Like this is a hard scenario, and you got, your reputation's at stake now. And I fear for someone like Justin Tan because he went into something unprepared. And actually tried to be, from what his words are saying, trying to be the nice guy through this whole thing. And guess what? Nice guy gets you his last, man. So he admits to making mistakes. It's a good idea. Tell the truth as best you can. At all costs. I'm a big fan of telling the truth, even if it doesn't make you look good. Tell it. He pretty much says, he did some things he was ashamed of, some behaviors he wouldn't have done again. And again, this is more about like negotiation tactics he used once he realized he was in trouble financially with carrying the roster. But I think the most interesting part is what happened previous. So again, I'm not going to read through the interview. It's online at vpesports.com. But to summarize it, he strikes a deal. Who the hell was it with again? It was with a bigger org, Wildcard Gaming. So he strikes a deal with Wildcard Gaming to sell the league, I guess the license and the roster spot and the roster to Wildcard Gaming, which was his plan all along, like real estate, buy and flip. Sign the team to a contract, paid them, wants to sell them, get out, make money, be done with it. So he says here that him and Wildcard, Accelerate Gaming, Justin Tan, and Wildcard actually signed a deal to sell it. It was done. It was a done deal. Part of this deal, though, again, there are some screenshots that were sent. I'm going to get lost with all this, but I guess it was the part that was missed was that the players on the Accelerate roster would have to renegotiate a new contract with Wildcard. They wouldn't be able to keep either the current deal that they had, or there just was confusion about that from what I could tell. But regardless, they had to get a new deal going. So after the roster is sold, the players go to negotiate the contract, and they are pissed because Wildcard's offering them less than what Accelerate was even paying them. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, well, the spot, where it's like in no man's land again. You technically don't have a contract. You're playing in the roster spot. You don't own the roster spot. You're pretty effed. Whatever the org tells you they're going to pay you is essentially what you signed for, or else they're going to sign people that would sign that deal. And let me tell you something right now, players. This is the part that no one gets. If you don't think there are people underneath of you, maybe a little less skillful, maybe a little less talented, they haven't had the right opportunities yet. If you don't think there are people out there that play Call of Duty that would love the contracts that you're rejecting left and right, you're out of your mind. You have no awareness to your circumstances. There are plenty of gamers throughout the entire world that want to play professionally and would love to do it on a stage and be on Twitch and have thousands of people watch them play and sign a contract and make $1,000, $2,000 a month. There are plenty of people that would do that. So if you're going to be arrogant enough to go in there and expect something and then be mad when your expectations aren't met, you're a fool. And you need to change that. And I don't say it to be mean. I say it to be honest. You're a fool. You need to start changing your mindset. You have a foolish mindset. Grow up, mature. That ain't the way it's going to work, ever. Not the way these rules are currently set up. It's never going to work that way. And if you want to talk about changing rule sets, different conversation, I don't know if I don't know how I feel about that. But anyways, they go to negotiate with Wildcard. The players are mad. Wildcard's offering less money, less things. They go back to the Accelerate CEO, Justin Tan, and say, man, this sucks. Complain to him, which is such a ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. That whole thing's ridiculous. Justin Tan listens to them, according to his interview, listens to them and says, okay, that does suck for you guys. I didn't know that was going to play out like that. Would you want to come back and play for me with our contract? Players obviously say yes because all they care about is short-term money. They argue about these couple $100 here and there a month. It's ridiculous. So that's all they think about. So, of course, they say yes. Somehow the deal gets ripped up between Wildcard and Accelerate. The deal's ripped up. Justin Tan takes back the team and continues to pay their salary. I'm trying to find where his... I want to read this direct quote because it's bad. Oh, man. You just have to read it. Go on to VP Esports. They did a great job with asking questions and typing up the answers. I'll paraphrase. Oh, here we go. It says right here. Quote, so when the sale to Wildcard, and this is from Justin Tan, quote, when the sale to Wildcard didn't go through, I needed to renegotiate the contract to help us remain financially solvent. The way I handled this situation is my biggest regret. I thought they were going to play hardball, so I played hardball. So, he promised something he couldn't deliver on. He tells the players, I'll take them back. When he looks at the numbers, he goes, oh my God, this was not my plan. I meant to flip it and sell them off. Now I'm carrying the overhead, and I told them I would carry on their salaries. I can't do that, so we need to renegotiate. So now, the players, just check this out. The players were being paid something. They go to Wildcard. Wildcard offered them less money. They said, no, we want more money. Justin Tan says, great, I'll pay you the more money. Come back. They said, yes, we'll do that. Then they go back to Accelerate, and then Accelerate comes and says, just kidding. Turns out I can't do that. We need to renegotiate a contract. So now the players are having to take a lesser salary no matter what they do. No matter what. And this is what I'm getting at. When you only look at salary, you're a fool. You're setting yourself up for disaster. And I actually understand Justin Tan's point. I understand what he's getting at. How come the players don't understand this? We cannot financially carry the burden of their expenses. Why won't they help me renegotiate? Well, number one, like I told you, they're arrogant, entitled, and spoiled. They do not give a crap about the orgs. Players don't give a crap about the orgs, and so then they're surprised when, again, the orgs treat them harshly. Air quotes. Safe space, bubbles. Just throwing in random adjectives to further the point. So Justin goes, well, I can't pay you that. We got to renegotiate. Then the players get super mad, and all this stuff goes down, blah, blah, blah. The company can't pay them salary on time, so now they're sending late salary payments. All this blowback's happening, and the thing just completely spirals out of control, and the players go, oh, he was trying to make us sign a new deal because he couldn't pay it. It is a disaster. It's an embarrassment, actually is what it is. It's an embarrassment. An absolute embarrassment. So that's how that scenario went down. But again, the reason why I want to bring this up, again, it really isn't to play commentary on that case or Call of Duty Pro League. Because again, I'm not an analyst and I don't watch every nook and cranny of Call of Duty Pro League. But I can read for myself and understand these business concepts. So you're essentially creating environments between orgs and players where they have no clue how to negotiate anything. They don't hire anybody to help. And then they're stuck when things go south. Shocker. The solution is orgs start providing value to players and try to get long-term deals. Players, stop caring about salary. It's embarrassing. If you get an extra $1,000 a month on your salary, which is pretty significant, it's $12,000 a year. It's like a part-time McDonald's job or whatever. You know what I mean? Like $12,000 is peanuts, and you're gonna sit there and argue over $12,000. Like I understand it's one thing if you're trying to negotiate a job. Let's say you graduate college, maybe like you're an engineer, and you want to get a job for or it doesn't need to be an engineer, any job, and you want to get a job for $60,000, and you go in for an interview and they offer you $29,000, and you're trying to get $60,000. I understand pushback on that. I get that. But when the difference between you and an org and your salary negotiations are a couple $100, do you have any idea what that looks like in a year or 2 years? Peanuts. And I just don't understand why you say things like, well, it's our worth. It's all self-entitled and things you're making up. So that's interesting. I hope I'm trying to drive value and not just playing recap on these scenarios. I'm not trying to just provide my 2 cents on the scenarios that went down. I'm trying to get to the point where we actually talk about solutions. And I think it's very clear that the current contract scenarios in esports is not working. And the org's just essentially licensing their name and trying to pay salary. It's never going to work from a business standpoint, especially for smaller to middle-sized orgs that can't carry the overhead. But they keep paying the salary because that's what everybody else is doing. And now the players, it only reinforces their entitlement because they're already making a lot of money. And now they're making even more money because they keep asking for more money. Both sides are severely to blame. And I think the only way to work past it is by being honest and having a truthful conversation, which I hope this starts to begin to stimulate. Couple last closing things from other players on this scenario. Same thing with Midnight Esports. So again, Midnight Esports, same thing kind of with Midnight Esports. They pay them a qualifying contract. They get into the league. Midnight owns the spot. Midnight never had any intention of selling. The players may have been under the impression that they were. You got everybody else that's got their opinion about Midnight should sell. Midnight should sell. Midnight has repeatedly said we're not selling. We view this as very valuable. We want to build this roster and become relevant in Call of Duty. They go to negotiate with the players. The CEO of Midnight claims to have offered the entire team, which I think is going to be 5 people and a coach, total net worth contract of like $244,000 with healthcare and 401k savings for 2 years. That's what he claims. True or not, I have no idea. That's what he claims to have offered, and the players rejected the deal. They thought it was shitty or whatever. You got all these other pros that commentate and say it's a shitty deal, whatever. It becomes their own bubble. It's an echo chamber. They all pop each other off on these high salaries and net worths, and it's just it's completely. It's funny how everybody cares about money more so than winning a damn championship is what it seems like. That's where the effort is going, is complaining about money and contracts and orgs, and you don't hear much about this desire to become a champion. So that's a problem for a different day. But then the Midnight Esports pretty much tells the players, okay, great, you rejected our deal. Well, we're not going to give you what you're asking for. This is our final offer, essentially. If you don't take it, we're going to just move on. We have the roster spot now. We will move on and cut you, and we will get another org in here. Another roster in here. And then what happens is the entire Call of Duty community views that as being shady. And to a certain extent, I understand it, because something doesn't feel right that if a roster qualifies for a spot, because they can't keep the license for themselves, they have to sign to an org, but then that gives all the leverage arbitrarily to that org to hold over them, or else they don't have to play in Pro League. Yeah, I don't like that. But I'm still blaming the players, partly because you should sign a better deal from the get-go. Sign a deal that takes care of all that. That 2-year deal that Midnight offered the players, I would have had that negotiated before I even would have qualified. And said, look, if we get in the Pro League, then that contract automatically goes into effect. And then we could talk about, and then our 2-year deal with Midnight Esports starts. But players want it both ways. They want large salary and they want job security without the commitment to an org. good luck. He offered you guys long-term commitment, 2 years. I don't know what the money breaks down to per person. It might be like $25,000 a year. I don't know. But again, my contention is I think there's more financial gain to be had by things outside of your salary. If you look at Tom Brady from the NFL, he makes salary that is like, it's measly compared to other quarterbacks. Why? Well, he makes money other ways. Yes, his wife's super rich, but Tom Brady's got brand deals and he wins. He lets the org keep the money to do things for them, and that's why they win. And it takes a certain type of character to have that ability to sacrifice short-term salary to have long-term winning, lasting legacy, do whatever the hell you want, and sell whatever you want on your own Twitter, and to create your own brand. A lot of people are short-sighted and don't understand that point. But I would have had that 2-year deal negotiated out beforehand. And then you understand where you stand. And if that's not a good enough deal, then don't sign with Midnight Esports before the qualifiers and go somewhere else. So yeah, that's kind of how I would summarize the Midnight and Accelerate thing. And I'm not going to get into the drama about, oh, they're making us sign it. They ain't making you sign nothing. You got to that position because of your own ignorance on contracts. And you don't like what they're offering you. But you understand that they deep down, players, you know when you're in that scenario, they have the leverage. And you better sign it or else you won't be in pro league. You're going to risk your spot. And so then what you do is you whine and cry and complain on Twitter and you post anonymously. Childish, unprofessional, and no way you go about it. Okay? So the point I'm trying to get is bring in long-term vision at the get-go, from the start. I'd love to see org sign players for 2 years. That's a very, very, very unpopular idea. It's very unpopular. Because players think that they need flexibility and that they deserve to not be locked down like that. They don't want to be locked down to long-term contracts. They want to be able to bounce around and do what they want. It's just a weird relationship. Players don't want the orgs, but they need the orgs. And the orgs don't really help themselves all that much because they don't provide that much value. There's only a few of them out there doing it right. And then the org can't figure out how to run a business. They can't figure out what to sell to the audience. They have this audience, and they try to sell T-shirts. You know what you make off a T-shirt? Pennies. It's not a good idea. As like your main source of income besides sponsorships, which are hard to secure. They should sell a lot of things to their audience, especially around gaming. Okay, we'll wrap it up. Just some thoughts from other people that I think make sense. So Crim6 is a guy from Optic that's been very successful. And he says, I think the reason roster mania happened is so many of the teams realized, hey, we're not going to be in the league next year. Let's just F over the players and make them sign Supermax deals so we can sell them. I mean, but it's speculation and it's his opinion. But again, if the players view long-term deals, and he says it here, some Supermax deal, a long-term deal. If the players think that that's a bad idea, but they also want the job security, that is diametrically opposed to one another. You know, I don't know what the players want. You just want to keep signing 3-month contracts all the time, or you want the players to have all the power when it comes to pro league, and the orgs have no power. I mean, I just don't think you can get it both ways. And then so what? If an organization wants to gets in for pro league and they plan on flipping the roster spot, I don't know. I think that's part and parcel to the way the rules are written right now. So I'm not sure what more needs to be done, but I decided to include his advice in here because I think it's valuable to a certain degree. He says also getting an agent helps. I agree with that. I think you should, again, this is business acumen and business sense. And again, some players might not understand this. You should negotiate with your agent. Esports is a developing scene. You should promise them future pay. You know, it shouldn't be upfront pay retainers. Same with the lawyers, quite frankly. I would tell the lawyers when they're reviewing a contract, once the contract becomes signed, you'll pay them. But don't pay them upfront thousands of dollars because if you don't sign the deal, now you're just out money to the lawyer. I would kind of work it in and negotiate. You'd be surprised what happens if you ask. Just say, look, we're going to sign to an org. We can't pay you up front, but can you review the contract and then we'll pay you afterwards? I think it's a good idea. Crimson says, just try to prevent yourself. He says, so you're paying an agent so that you don't have to constantly worry about getting dropped. It's not necessarily true. I think depends on how the contracts are written, but in most sports, you're still tied to performance. Like, you can't have it both ways. You can't be paid a large salary and have job security and not have the fear of being cut or released, but then also not perform well, but have a large overhead of expense that you incur to the org. Like, you can't have it both ways. It's definitely not going to work. Let's see here. I'm going to wrap this thing up. Scump talks about it too. Another player from Org. What does he say? He says players need a better security blanket. What Accelerate did to their team and players is unfair. Imagine working years to achieve something to have it ripped from you for players with bigger names. Well, it's always been Accelerate, but here's the thing. That has always been their plan, to sell and flip like real estate. So you should have known going into Pro League when you qualify as a roster that don't sign with Accelerate if you don't want to be flipped and sold to another org. And then, the worst part is the security blanket. My man, security blanket? The players are in control of your own security blanket. Sign a contract that gives you security. Don't sign it then if you're not into it. And don't give me this crap about leverage. Then do it earlier. Work harder, work earlier. Take responsibility for things. Don't deflect blame for on other people and make other people look bad. It's not a good. You have to display ownership for your scenario and your situations. It's just a really good tenet of life. The last thing is you got somebody going on Reddit, and I understand Reddit can be toxic and people can be crazy on there, but they want to change the way Call of Duty Pro League works around revoking people's gaming license, and essentially advocating that someone like Midnight Gaming and Accelerate Gaming should have their license pulled when they don't what the player. Let's just say I don't understand what they're saying. The players, maybe in Accelerate's case because they actually had my understanding is they had a contract signed and he just was unable to pay it and they could not renegotiate a new contract. Therefore, the old contract was still in place and was paying them late and stuff like that. And that's different. Midnight Esports, again, my understanding is they did not have a contract that was active. And so they were stuck in no man's land where the roster's playing but not being paid because they didn't want the offer that was given to them. But then they want to complain about not being paid and say, look, we're not being paid. Well, you got to sign a deal. So, I'm not going to be for the Major League Gaming, which runs Call of Duty, just to come in and just start being judge, jury, and executioner and just ripping people's license away when the players in the orgs can't work out the details. So I actually think they're right, and I know Major League Gaming gets a lot of flack for just telling the players, because the players will go to here's the player. They run everywhere and cry like little babies. They run to the Twitter, they run to YouTube, they run to the Major League Gaming and say, help, 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 help! They're not paying us. Oh my God, they're not. And Major League Gaming just says, well, we have nothing to do with that. You have to work it out with them. I know players get pissed about that, but that's the right move by Major League Gaming. You can't just you just can't be judge, jury, and executioner. I get very fearful about that power, especially because you don't really have an interest. You're just running the league. You're trying to make it efficient. The players and the teams are the ones that are competing. Don't become a variable in the competition. So I'm definitely not for new roles where they can just rip people out of the league because the contract negotiations break down between players and orgs. So that's the overview using Call of Duty of the example, but that goes across the board to any game title. When you're negotiating a contract with an org, I highly suggest if you're a player, quit looking at salary. In fact, I would actually, and I'm not shitting you, I would take a lower salary if they gave me more perks and benefits. I would take like housing, food stipend, personal trainer, coach, analyst, and a mental fitness coach. I would take all that and a way less low salary than a high salary and none of the benefits. It's not even close. It's not even close because I think the real prize pool is in winning. And if you can show over time that you're a winning player and a winning team, not only do these tournaments are getting into the millions now all the time, but the prize pools are going up, 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 and up. Look at Fortnite. Okay, there's money everywhere. The pro leagues are going to have more money going. Call of Duty is going to franchise next year and make it even bigger. So the future is where you want to be. You got to remain relevant. So I would give up short-term financials to have long-term financials. I think that's the best move. Same thing with the stock market. When you put money into the market, you put it in there and leave it there. Don't pull it out and take it and put it, you know what I mean? Like put it in, invest it, and it'll over the peaks and valleys and the dips and the market corrections, you'll make money in the end if you leave it there. So that's how I would view it. I would look at the long term. I don't know if you understand, like Warren Buffett had a lot of like short-term losses where if these gamers and orgs were in charge, they would have fired him because it's not a short-term reward. But look at his long-term career. I mean, he's a super, super billionaire, right? So that's something to consider is your long-term viability of this thing. Are you in gaming to make $2,000 a month off a salary now, or do you want to be relevant in 3 years where the real money starts coming in? Be it the more BMWs invest, all these people coming in, not invest, sponsor teams. The more money that keeps floating in here, the more opportunity you'll have down the road to make the money. So that's my advice to players. Long-term money, not the short-term. Come to a win-win scenario with an org. You might not like them, and I understand why. They don't they seem like they try to take advantage of you. They hold a lot of power, especially when it gets to pro leagues and the rule sets. And they don't really do that much. They're terrible managers. They're disorganized. A lot of them are like employing the strategy of hiring like really shitty workers for really low pay, and like I really don't like that. I'm not a fan of that. And utilizing the popularity of esports as a way to like not have to pay people money is a really bad strategy. Just really bad. That ain't gonna work. And so I understand they're doing that, and so obviously it's a pain in the ass to work with them because they're just not a good business. It's like going to McDonald's and dealing with people at fast food, and that's not the smack talk on people at fast food, but let's be honest, they're not engineers, right? So like, and that's fine. Everybody can be an engineer. There are jobs that need people with different skill sets, and so when you work and you can't, and travel accommodations are a pain in the ass, or you're trying to register for tournaments, and that's pain because the org's taking forever, or whatever it is. I understand that. I really do. I'm very, very, very empathetic to that point of view, and I agree with you 1,000%. Which is why I spend a lot of my work. Yes, we do help players, and we do mental fitness sessions with the players, but I'm spending a lot of time talking to orgs behind the scenes, trying to get them to understand they need to start training, developing players. Hire someone like us to actually train players. I understand you don't want to build out a whole huge system. Let us do it for you, essentially. Like, that's the whole point. So, but again, try to create a win-win scenario with an org where you actually like the org for who they are and what their vision is. Ask them these questions. What's your long-term vision? What are you going to do with the spot in Pro League? Are you going to sell us? Are you going to keep us? You want to try to grow our roster? And then I would sign a longer long-term deal. I know players don't like that, but I think if you don't like the idea of being cut, well, then sign a deal that doesn't allow you to be cut. Sign a 2-year deal that makes it hard for the org to release you. That way, the org also, then, you're going to attract an org that wants long-term development of you guys. So that's what I would do. In terms of the orgs, when it comes to these contracts, I know that you're making these things heavy-fisted because players keep screwing you over and they talk a lot of smack and they're being ruthless on their salary demands. Step one is quit giving in to their demands. The talent pool, for some reason, people think the talent pool is very small in esports. I think it's actually rather large. I think there's going to be an endless supply of video game players that are good enough that could be a potential gamer if you develop them correctly. Like Tom Brady was drafted. Again, I love using Tom Brady as an example. 6th-round draft pick in the NFL. That's super late. He almost didn't get drafted. I don't know what happened when he sat behind Drew Bledsoe, but he had a certain skill set already, but he obviously grew and developed. Same idea. It's like Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers in the NFL sat behind Brett Favre for a couple years, grew, developed, learned, and then became a starter, and then became one of the best quarterbacks in the league. The guys that sometimes get right into the fire, that as a rookie get put into the starting quarterback role, flop a lot. And I think it's because of that, the lack of development. So I would really encourage that the orgs can sign less on the radar talent and sign some under the radar talent for less money and make your business financially viable. Especially if you're securing investment from people, like people are raising these A rounds and B rounds of funding and millions and millions and millions of dollars. If you're not creating a business that looks profitable, if it's just a big expense machine, you're gonna have a tough time convincing people. I just think you just go in there and say, look, we're trying to build a common sense business. We're going to make money. Here's how we're going to make profit. We're going to keep our expenses as low as we can while building brand. We're going to sell our audience multiple things. We're going to win prize pool monies. We're going to field winning teams. Like, that's the route to go down. But do not keep paying players inflated salaries. Lastly, on the salary bit, I was talking to a team that is an unsigned team in a different game, and I don't know how they're able to keep it. Maybe that has a different handbook, but they're unsigned. But obviously, they're not making a salary. So they're not making any money right now unless they win the prize pool of that game's league. Well, I talked to them about their demands, and their demands were astronomical. I thought their demands were way too high in what they were going for. And I asked them on what basis how did you arrive at these numbers? On what basis do you think you're worth this and should be paid this? And they just said, well, that's what we used to be paid. That's a really dangerous mindset. You can't use the past to dictate the future. If I bought a VCR factory 2 years before DVDs were invented, but then I tried to sell my VCR factory because DVDs are killing me and I wanted to get out before I lose more money, I tried to sell it, I ain't going to get what I paid for it. I hope that makes sense. You can't go off of the past. You got to go what's in the future. And maybe they were cut in the first place because that org realized they're wasting too much money on them. So now, but because the org did that, they gave this team a false sense of expectations, and here they are unsigned. Partially because they refuse to take anything less. It's so short-term sighted. It's very discouraging. I feel very, very, very bad. It's just not healthy. It's not good. So, orgs, quit paying people, quit overpaying them money. Be businessmen. Look at it. What's my expenses? How much money can we make off this? How much brand do they bring? How much followers do they bring? What can we sell people? Get focused. Number 2, create a training and development system for your players. Be valuable. Give them something. Give them coaches. Give them analysts. Give them software. Give them personal training. Give them great food. Give them a mental fitness coach. Give them maybe housing and stipends. I don't know, but give them perks. Don't just give them salary. Give them perks. And then you can eat that as an expense. But the difference is, instead of you paying a salary to that player, your expense for a personal trainer can be used on all of the players, not just that one player getting a salary. Does that make sense? Like, you can disperse that throughout your company and essentially have that as a central expense that benefits everybody involved, not just when you pay someone a salary, it just goes to that one person. I think that should make sense to people. Start becoming valuable and make them better. Sign a team that's under the radar. I think it's one of the best strategies to go right now. Whatever game, there are people that are hungry everywhere. Find a team that's hungry, has the right mindset, work out a long-term deal, 12 to 24-month deal, and say, look, here's where you currently are. We think you have potential. We want to raise and train you. So yeah, phase 1 of your contract's low paying, but guess what? If you perform well, you'll win money in the prize pools. Plus, we can build in phase 2 of a contract where if you hit certain benchmarks, it's like bonuses. You'll earn this mark or you'll get to this rank of salary, whatever it is. Don't just base it off of time. Don't just say, well, 3 months in, we'll pay you this. Like, base it off of something. Base it off of performance metrics. I think it's a really good strategy. And then I had one more for the orgs. What was it now, orgs? Work on the long-term deals. Like, ties in the same way. Work on longer-term deals that are good for the players, not good for you. I know Crim6 mentioned that there may be orgs that try to beef up long-term contracts and then sell it for a lot of money. That's not what I mean. I mean, sign it for real because you want to develop players. I think there's definitely a way to do that. That it also provides that job security to the players. They're not fearful then that they got to perform at the next qualifier. They can have 9, 10, 12 months to get after it and show worth, which I think is how you should do it. You should want to be paid on your merit, not because of a contract. You should want to earn your contract. Lastly, this is the last part for the orgs. You got to learn to create new revenue streams. Getting a sponsorship and selling apparel, great. You should do it. Absolutely should do it. You should go at it hard. But I think it's short-sighted. I think you should also develop courses. Our service, again, here's something that we're looking to do, is partner with an org where we create a training development system. We do what exactly what I'm telling you for free on the podcast is what I'm essentially pitching to people is like, sign people that are less talented because they'll come cheaper. They won't have as much demand. You can promise them a lot more things. Hire a company like ours to train and develop the players, make them better than they are. Then they'll become even more competitive because I think there's tons of teams that would be competitive. They just don't have the opportunity. So give them the opportunity to compete. They should already perform well, but now you're training them, making them better. They have the right mindset. They're in alignment with the org. It's a win-win. Well, let all the other teams fight between the org and players. This org could have cohesion. You build them up, you train them up, you go win, and then you sell a version of training and have a revenue or profit sharing off of it with someone like us. You know, we'll sell some of our services in conjunction with your brand, and we'll split some money. Like that's a good idea. Now that creates revenue and creates new income for the org. So it's not just an expense anymore. You're not just paying a personal trainer to train. You actually can pay a personal trainer to make your teams better, but then you can also work with the personal trainer to sell a new product. Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. Courses, maybe books. I'm not a big information guy. I think you should give your information away for free and sell a system. So, but you could definitely sell personal training or some form of sports performance package. You could sell mental fitness training. You could sell, I think apparel is good. You might even get a deal where you can sell like accessories and make bonus codes and stuff like that. Like I know people do that now, but I think you could do it to a greater extent. Just provide, again, the same way that you should start providing value to your players, you should start providing value to your audience. Don't just sell them shit they don't want. Sell them things that are actually really beneficial to them too. You know, come up with new things. Be smart. Think about things innovatively. I think that's it. I think we covered everything we wanted to. The biggest thing, though, is the contract scenario is a disaster from both sides. We need to figure that thing out. Hopefully, it's just a catalyst of the conversation. I'm not claiming I've solved it. I sure as hell haven't. That ain't the purpose. The purpose is to give my 2 cents on there where I think the deficiencies are for both sides and how you can work past that then to overcome those deficiencies And I think it just happens to revolve around having honest conversations, being upfront about what you want as players and what you as the org want upfront from the players. I think that's a great conversation to have. Look at long-term instead of short-term. That'll give you your security as well as vision that you guys can share. And don't be obsessed over the money, both sides. Don't ask for an absurd amount of money from the players, even though you think you're worth it. Dumb. And then orgs, don't just give them the money, because now it's affecting your bottom line and affecting you in the back end of running your business. And then you end up like, I know the extreme case is the Accelerate case, but now you can't afford to even pay them, and now you're in violation of your contract. So hopefully this gets it going. And I appreciate anybody that's stuck through and watched the whole thing, and I appreciate your 2 cents. Again, we're not claiming to be right, so we are completely open to criticism or your points of view. You can leave them a comment here on YouTube or on Facebook. Thanks very much.